This meeting is being recorded.
Wonderful to have you all here today. This topic certainly has resonated with a lot of people. The CEO title, Breaking Down Stereotypes. I'm Lyn Hawkins. I'm the National Director of Businesswomen Australia and I'm a founder of Businesswomen Australia. And I'm actually meeting in beautiful Perth in Boorloo on the country of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. And we're streaming in from all around this gorgeous country. I'd like to pay our respects to all Indigenous elders past, present, and those who are emerging, and to celebrate our Indigenous sisters in business. If anyone has any ideas for topics around the sorts of things that are going to help you be successful in achieving your goals and dreams, or any topics that you would love us to unpack and tackle, I'd love to hear about that. We've got a wonderful program, not just for business owners and entrepreneurs, but also for professionals, executives, managers, women on boards, women in C-suite roles, leaders, emerging leaders. And we cover loads of different topics like leadership development, business improvement, a lot of work around personal growth and professional growth, influence, raising our profile, amplifying our voices, being seen and heard, and of course, connection. We are importantly, I think, one of the fastest growing, most influential networks of female leaders in business across all the professions and states in Australia. We're an overnight success. We've been going for 10 years, which surprises a lot of people. We're celebrating 10 years this year. So that's pretty exciting. And we've been built on these values of curiosity and conscious care. And I think it means that it really underpins how down to earth we all are. I think people get very surprised at the vulnerability and sharing that goes on inside the Businesswomen Australia community. And we're always looking for the opportunity for new members to join us. So if you've got any questions about being a member, or if your organisation wants to partner or sponsor, we're also looking for more financial support to be sustainable. It's been largely propped up by My Family Trust. It is a private company. The shareholders are all female. I own the majority of shares, and we have a wonderful new Business Australia Advisory Board who have volunteered to help me work out the shape of what Businesswomen Australia needs to evolve so that we continue to be relevant. You can see we do a lot on the smell of an oily rag. It really is quite extraordinary. I have a team of two virtual assistants that work with me, and we work on a co-creation model with our members. And our members are actually the heroes of all our topics. So if you've got something that you want to share and you're a knowledge expert or a thought leader, please come on board and help us create this amazing opportunity to really amplify female leadership. What we know and what we can share can really change the way that the world does business, whether that's in the for-purpose space or in the profit sector. Coming up, you can see there's loads coming up in Perth, partly because that's where I actually live. And so we've been very active here. It sort of seems to have a really strong momentum. But I'm very excited to see that Sydney and Brisbane are bringing more things online now. And I can very pleased to say that we have more board members in Melbourne than in any of the other states. So I'm really excited to see what our Melbourne cohort will be bringing into the calendar as well. I actually have two children that go to RMIT in Melbourne, so any excuse to get on the East Coast, the better. Also have family who I love dearly, and very happily they are in Sydney. My brother and I have an interesting relationship, but I love him to bits, but his kids are awesome, so any excuse to go to Sydney, I do appreciate. And of course, Brisbane, well, who doesn't love Brisbane? I'd love to see community set up in Adelaide. So if you have any connections at all that are interested in helping us lead that growth in Adelaide, I would love to hear and meet them. Vida, we've got the retreat coming up, haven't we? I've got the wonderful Vida Carlino on the line here. Vida, I think, some of the things around this retreat that really make it different is that you're a master of helping leaders identify their purpose and become purpose-driven leaders. And is that's going to be a pretty key part of this retreat, isn't it?
It's a very key part. It's all about reshaping our leadership from the inside out. And being a purpose-driven leadership is a lot more than concept. It's about being embodied, being deliberate about the way we show up every day, being aligned, having our mental, emotional, our physical, our intuitive, and even our spiritual intelligences all working in the same, all moving forward in the same direction. So yeah, it's going to be a very full weekend, yet it still has space for relaxation and retrospection and introspection and all the other beautiful things that we have at the retreat, along with the fact that the venue is divine. It's absolutely luxurious. We'll feel like we're little princesses. So there's lots happening. It'll be amazing.
So love to have, we've still got 15 places available. They will be filling up. We have the Blue Karma resort booked entirely for us and for our use. It's going to be very private space. It's going to be transformational. I'm certainly looking forward to it after what's been a massive couple of years. I'm really looking forward to that workshop experience that you're curating, Vida. The more I'm learning about that, the better. And we've got Vida coming onto a podcast where we'll be unpacking what is purpose-driven leadership and what would we be doing that's going to help us develop that and connect that to our power as leaders, leading ourselves and leading others. We're across all the social media channels that you would expect us to be. So please follow us. Please support our members. Please engage and help raise the profile of women around Australia who are doing incredible things. And thank you so much to our partners. We could not do what we do without this incredible support from our fabulous partners and sponsors. And so without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Kate. So Kate came to me and said, look, this is something I would love to unpack with our members. I'm not that happy with being called the CEO. And we thought that we would actually get some perspectives from you. But before we do, I'd like Kate to actually take herself off mute. I'm going to just stop sharing this for a minute. And let's hear from Kate about why she wanted to unpack this topic.
Oh, dear. I was speaking with my other colleagues at work yesterday about doing this, reminding everybody that I'm doing it, and I had some questions about, so what's your problem with CEO? So I think mostly it's about, I would like to connect with others, especially women, who also don't really like the title of CEO. And see if there's other, what else could we call ourselves? Yeah, what's the alternatives? I also the first time I've come across this word, the C-suite. I didn't even know what that was till like a few days ago. So I looked up what C-suite was. I don't know. I just I've never seen myself as having this title, and it seems I know that the expression imposter syndrome gets bandied about, but I think I've worked hard to be where I am. I don't think I'm suffering from imposter syndrome. I just don't like the elitism that seems to come with the label, that because I'm no better than anybody else that I'm working with. So my partner, Andre, he said, when you walk into a room and you say that you're CEO, everybody then knows what you're responsible for in the organization. And I thought, well, okay, that's a good point. And I sort of came back with partly the I don't actually like being called, I don't use the title Mrs. I use Ms. I have for a very, very long time. I don't think it should matter to anybody whether I am married or not. So I had that sort of feeling about CEO, but he did make a very good point. So I'm now just totally confused.
Love that. And I love that we're bringing this to the table because, you know, this is where we can shape sort of ideas that might be relevant to you, might be relevant to someone else. And I did, you know, when we were preparing for this yesterday, I said, you know, some women are going to get on this call who are very comfortable with being called a chief executive officer and a CEO. And obviously in some, particularly in a public company environment, they probably haven't got the choice of being able to change their titles. They may be able to internally, but, you know, there's this sort of statutory governance issue around that. But in our environment, in the for-purpose space and in other spaces, we might have the flexibility to be able to be a little more creative. And I'd like to open it up to anyone who feels comfortable sort of sharing perhaps why you came along. What was it about this topic that interested you to come and join the conversation? Is anyone feeling, take yourself off mute so I can see if you would like to share why you came along today. Okay, Estelle, good on you.
Hi. I actually didn't really think about that until I saw the title of your webinar, and it's really funny because I think about it differently now that I have my own company than when I used to work for a much larger organization. And a much larger organization, it kind of makes sense for me because there's so many people, and you kind of had to know who was there, and you had regulatory obligations and so on that led with the CEO title. And but now that I have my own practice, and I don't feel comfortable at all with that title, and particularly because that's not the way I guess I operate within my business. When I have people working with me, it is with me, so it is more of an equal relationship, and therefore now I find the CEO title to be a little bit, it just doesn't quite fit for me in this context, in that way of working.
So what I'm hearing from Kate and from Estelle is this concept of a flatter structure, of a more collaborative culture, rather than the typical sort of hierarchy with the CEO sitting at the top as a director, as a leader, as a do it my way, this is what we have to do. So it's just kind of bringing up a whole lot of sort of, I guess, even our biases around how we want to and how the future is evolving around organisational behaviour and change and growth. Sarah, you've taken yourself off mute. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say.
Yes, hi. I mean, I've worked in a corporate environment, and currently am a I guess sort of portfolio career director and so forth. But I've done a number of interim executive roles, including CEO. I think that you can be both a CEO and a servant leader, you know, a modest and supportive leader. I think they are, you know, we're describing two different things. The servant leadership, for example, is how you go about what you do. The CEO to me, and it may be, I don't know, a bit old-fashioned, I suppose, but that to me is the person who has a team of direct reports who themselves manage managers. So it's purely a structural description of someone who has direct reports who are maybe departmental heads or so forth. So they are the kind of chief officer of their particular discipline. And then you are the head of those and you're on the executive team together. I think the more, the flatter the structure gets and the less hierarchical the structure gets, you don't actually need to call yourself CEO. You can call yourself whatever works for your environment. But I do think that I'm with Andre in that part of the name is a signal for other people as to, you know, how that sits. And I certainly in my corporate life, I worked for a multinational company with lots of multinational competitors, and it was an enormous source of angst for a lot of the male heads of the country, you know, country manager type things, whether their organization was, say, American and therefore very big on giving people incredibly splendid titles, or French and much more modest, where, you know, you could have been in charge of, you know, $500 million and 3,000 people and you were still called general manager. So, you know, some of it is context, particularly when you're employing or attracting talent and so forth. You kind of just have to have some markers of what the scope of that role is, and the easiest marker is the title. But I think if you have, you know, as you've said, Lyn, if you haven't got constraints, oh, sorry, no, it wasn't you, it was Estelle Pape. I can't remember, sorry. If you haven't got constraints around, you know, what those titles are meant to be, then it kind of comes back to what suits best in the context of the work and particularly your customers.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. You've so eloquently put that forward. I just recall some of my colleagues who had set up a business that had a lot of American clients, and they were all vice presidents on their business cards and on their titles, because Americans will only want to deal with the top guy who's the vice president. They were all vice presidents. I said, wow. So from a marketing and positioning point of view and a door opening point of view, they used it as a part of their strategic positioning. Teresa, you've got yours off mute.
Yeah. I found this very, very interesting because I've done a lot of different things like creative projects, and where I've written a book, so it's like author, and written a course creator, doing a podcast, podcaster, and it's all these different titles. But it does describe part of who I am, but not everything of who I am. So what Kate was saying, I can kind of, in some ways, relate to it, although I'll get to why, because I've just taken on a choir. So the last 12 months I've been building a choir. So I'm a choir director. So that title, I've struggled a little bit with, you know, whether I should print it on the back of my t-shirt that I am the choir director. And I've been struggling with, you know, does that mean that I'm separate from my team if I put that onto my t-shirt, onto my shirt? And then I thought about it. I thought, I've worked really hard this past 12 months, and I've now got a team of 30 people in my choir who need a leader. They need someone to be that person that they go, well, we've got I'm training up conductors, but I'm the choir director, so I'm directing where we're going, where the leadership is, where the vision's going, how big we're going to grow, all of that sort of thing. So there needs to be a differentiation. So I've embraced it. So it's just funny. I've only in the past, I just ordered my jumper with choir director on the back, because I thought people need to know that I'm directing the vision. Because if you're managing people, it can be sometimes if you try to go the servant leadership way and you try to be all inclusive and everyone's opinion matters, someone ultimately has to have the badge on their front or on their back saying, I'm going to make the ultimate decision. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all. And you also become a target as well, because people think that you're weak. So that's just...
Thank you, Teresa. So that's so honest, and I love the vulnerability in your sharing there. And it reminds me of, you know, I work with a lot of managing partners of big firms, but law firms predominantly, and I often say to them, they're a bit like a conductor of an orchestra, you know, and kind of when if they're away for too long from, you know, leading from the front too, and being clear about the vision and what the song is going to look like and bringing people in at the right time, then it kind of sounds that the organisation sounds like, you know, when you go to the opera and the orchestra's practicing, and it's all over the place before the conductor comes in. I just love that analogy. So, and it's gorgeous. Thank you for being here. It's so good to have someone from the creative arts as well here. Anna, you've got your off mute. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'm probably coming from a completely different angle, given that clearly I work for a bank and I don't have my own business, but my day-to-day I work with various businesses, whether they're corporate, small business, or SMEs, basically. And I guess just to touch on the initial comment about the CEO title, I think you're fortunate in, if you've founded your own business and you're working within that, I guess that gives you leverage then to decide to be called whatever you really want. Businesses do go through that transformation, I guess, where they do sort of corporatize themselves, but I guess that's part of that growth journey, if you like. But a lot of the businesses that I find that have sort of not necessarily startup, but have been operating over a few years, the word founder is actually used quite commonly across those sorts of businesses as well. So it sort of still gives you that, it's not an elitism kind of reference, but it actually sort of identifies you as being, you actually established this business, you've got the innovation behind it potentially, but it also gives you that sort of top of the tree. That's who we want to really speak to and understand where that came from and where the business has evolved from, but then also as a point of direction for who else we might want to talk to as well. So, and I think then going back into that sort of CEO, I agree with what Sarah was saying. I think in the world that I live in and that I've always sort of worked in, it does give us that sort of hierarchical kind of, I guess, point of contact and context to, who are you and where do you actually fall within this particular org structure, because in our space we do need to speak to certain people, whether it's a CFO or financial controller. Titles mean quite a bit where we come from. Obviously director and VPs and things like that also make our life a little bit easier. So I think from our side of the fence, it's always easy to slot people into those holes, if you like. But I think, being on Kate's side and Vida's side, where you are actually in the business and you've developed your own business, then I think unless you're going into an IPO or something like that, call yourselves whatever you feel comfortable calling. From our side, we're always going to know who we need to talk to, because we do a lot of research to make sure. So yeah.
And what you've raised is really important, because while there's a stereotype and perhaps a picture that we might have of a CEO, and it being kind of conservative and restricted, or bossy or aloof or elite, when we're even in our own businesses and in for-purpose and not-for-profit spaces, we are also dealing with people who are potentially going to be funding what we're doing. We're also dealing with people who are looking at how serious we're taking the organisation, the vision and the mission, and they can have a stereotype around, some of the fun names I've been coming across in startups, like Chief Optimism Officer, and we in the startup space, and I see a lot of this, and I'm on the other side sitting with the investors and the venture capital people, and they have to get over that hurdle to see, are these people really, if I'm going to be giving a lot of funding or seed capital, or if I'm going to be entrusting this group and promoting this group and investing in it, are they serious? It doesn't sound as serious, but it also sounds great, because in that startup space, and it's all very values driven and purpose driven. So it's this dance between these two different value systems. So thank you, Anna.
Yeah. No problems. And so can I just say as well, I think the tables are turning as well, because just to your point, Lyn, about I've seen Chief Fund Officer on business cards and titles and things like that of very big operations and businesses. And I think that's stemming from the Googles. You look at businesses like High Smile and the LSKDs around, and they've got, the age limit is, that sort of range is coming down. There are different dynamics within the team groups and sort of, I guess, that flexibility. So I'm not sure that the whole title of CEO, CFO, and the likes will continue into, you know, into the future. They might have a little bit more flex around them. But I mean, I sort of joined this just to sort of see what the commentary was around it. I personally have never really given it a second thought. So it's actually interesting to see, yeah, what other people's thoughts are on that. Thanks.
Yeah, excellent. Kate, do you want to say something?
Yeah, another one of my sort of thoughts about when I was thinking about this conversation is that, I mean, my dad's not around anymore, but I know he would be so thrilled that I'm CEO. Like, and so I just wondered if that is a generational thing as well, that there's a lot of, and so just like Anna was just saying, you know, as you know, things are changing. The older population is moving out of these roles and a younger one is moving in. Listened very recently to a podcast about Generation X, and I'm Generation X, and how we're sort of a little bit overlooked because we've got Generation Y underneath us and the boomers in front of us. And there's a lot that is expected from Generation X. There seems to be a feeling that Generation X are just now coming into their own. And even though we're sandwiched in between young people and older people, and for a lot of us looking after our elderly parents and still having our young kids, you know, still involved as well. Yeah, it's changing how things are happening. So I think that's really good.
Yeah.
Very positive.
Absolutely. I agree. And over to Sonia, you're off mute. What would you
Did you
like?
say my name? Who did you say?
Sonia.
Me. Okay, cool. I just came actually from a session with Rare Birds, and she was talking about the change in organizational structure, and actually from that, this was kind of a way of organizing businesses based on what in the 19th century, sort of the Industrial Revolution, and having a hierarchy of leadership within an organization, which with a much more, much less complex organizational structures. So, things like, I mean, for banking, etc., it makes sense because of the regulatory environment as well, to have quite a defined structural organisation, whereas in this day and age where things are changing and the way that we do business is changing, and an increase in portfolio type of careers, that structure doesn't make sense. So it is changing. But the reason why, and all of the, I'd never really thought about it, to be honest. I was thinking about it more in terms of actually what I picture to be a CEO, as opposed to, and who kind of rises up to those positions. And I mean, I'm a founder as well of a business, and I actually struggle with using the title CEO, maybe because I don't know if I believe that I am a CEO, and I feel more comfortable with the title of founder. But yeah, so that was kind of where it originated, and I think for me, I think what I consider, or one of the reasons why I joined this chat was, the stereotype is we still have in corporates, quite a male representation of CEO that looks a particular way and is a particular way. And I thought perhaps we would be exploring a little bit more around how do we break that cycle a bit, or that stereotype.
Thanks, Sonia. That might actually be a topic in its own right, is how do we get more women into whatever role they want to call it, but that's sitting at that leadership CEO top role. Lauren, you've had yourself off mute for a while. Can we hear from you?
I really appreciate everyone's comments, and I wanted to add a different perspective as well, in terms of I worked in finance and banking for 20 years, and especially in the SME space where we didn't have these titles. So all these businesses you work for didn't have a CEO title, they were business partners and so forth. But one thing that was really interesting is some training that we had to do a long time ago. It was Miller Hyman training around influences in the business. And at the end of the day, I know Anna's going, oh, that's another thing. At the end of the day, there's an economic buyer or an economic decision maker. So that's that one person that everyone turns to make that final call. You might have all these technical people come and these influencers come and help alleviate that, but everyone looks to that one person to make that decision. And we always had to identify that. So when I was in front of businesses and you've got people that started the business together and you ask the question, oh, how are you going to come to your decision? Always generate their focus towards one particular person, and then you can clearly identify that was the economic influencer in that business. So even though some small businesses don't have the titles of CEO or director or chief fund officer, there is one person that does make that key decision. So and businesses need that to function well, that one person to make that final call, taking all the opinions and thoughts and decisions that have been made and make that final call. And that was that economic person that you had to identify. So I think that's just a really important part to add into that conversation.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Lauren. At the end of the day, there is one person and the buck stops with them. Kate, did you want to say something? It's your show, so you get to talk more than anybody else.
Thank you. So we're a cooperative, and being a cooperative means that decisions are made for us. Decisions are made. A group of people make the decisions. So even though we have ended up with some titles like CEO and CFO, they are purely, seems to me, so that other businesses know stuff about us, whereas internally it doesn't come to much because our CFO cannot make any decisions entirely by himself. The decision has to be unanimous between the directors of the cooperative. He has a lot of input, of course, and we rely on him a lot because he's an accountant, but then we're not. But for him to get across his ideas, it's very much mutual. We all discuss stuff. It does potentially mean that it takes longer to make decisions, but I think we make better decisions because we're all involved in that. Yeah. So I just wanted to make that point. That
Thanks, Kate. And I
there's
might actually go to Kate Biondo, who's got her hand up there as
My
well.
hand up.
And
Yeah.
as a part of just so that everyone knows that Dr. Kate Ringvale here is also in the Galactic Cooperative, so alongside working with Kate.
Yeah, we went with similar names so that it was easy for people to remember us. So what I wanted to say was, kind of building on what Kate was saying, one of the things that I found really interesting when I started work at IKEA Australia was that it felt very similar to a cooperative. They have a very flat hierarchy, and they don't really have kind of fancy labels generally. Like the CEO is the country manager, and they are also now the chief sustainability officer across the globe. So, and IKEA really sits within a culture of quite flat hierarchy, very egalitarian, and they've really worked to get that kind of culture. And so IKEA really lives and breathes that as kind of business as usual. And, similar to the way that they make decisions or the way that we make decisions in Galactic, they take a long time to make a decision. There's a lot of consulting. People are kind of asked for their opinion. They go around the circle and it goes around and it goes around and it goes around. And sometimes you think they're never, ever going to make a decision. But once they make that decision, they move really quickly because they're kind of set, ready to go. Everyone's ready for either answer, but they're ready to go once they have made that decision. And so, back in 2018, when they said we're going to be 100% circular by 2030, those, globally, and those of us in Australia went, how are we going to do that? And by the time I'd left, they were 60% of the way to that goal. And I was there for 3.5 years. So, yeah, I think there are some really different approaches to leadership, and I think this kind of Western reductionist kind of neoliberal sort of, it's very patriarchal kind of way of leading, I think is dying, thankfully. I think we need some different examples of what leadership really looks like, and positive leadership. Really reflective, regenerative types of leadership is what we're really after.
I love that. I mean, we could have entitled this "Death of the CEO." We probably would have had even 100 registrations. But it's very reflective of the changing of corporate structures and how the next generation are potentially wanting more of these flatter structures. And again, you've identified the cultural nuance of a country and a corporation that comes out of a particular country, which Anna, unfortunately missed Anna's input earlier on around some of the different banking, or was it Sarah's actually, Sarah or Anna, that were talking about the different names that people have according to whatever culture they come from. The French, kind of downplay out there a hierarchical name, and whereas the Americans would, be pumping theirs up. It's interesting, and it is. And you look at the American culture, it's very individualistic, it's very hierarchical, patriarchal, and it's becoming very evident now, particularly in the current climate, seeing young Don out there being so popular. Yeah, so who else had their...
I do. I'll have a say.
Oh, yeah, over to you, Claudette.
Well, I was thinking about, did you say Claudette or me?
I did, but you can go first.
Okay. Well, from my perspective, I think the title gives us a general understanding of what that position means, even though we may have different interpretations of that. So regardless of what the title is, it's the culture that determines whether it's inclusive or elitist, not so much the title in my experience. And my relationship to different titles is all based on my perception from my experiences of being engaged with those titles previously. So I don't really think the title means that much at all, except it gives me direction on where to go and an understanding that, they're in this sort of position. But how I feel about that and how I relate to that is all based on my experience of those titles previously. And they can be the CEO can be super inclusive or it can be super elitist. It's the culture of the organization that determines that point.
Yeah, and the values of the person, I'd say too.
Yeah, exactly.
How are they, how do they carry themselves? How do they behave? And
yeah.
Claudette, over to you.
I've on 2 occasions I was managing director. One of the companies was very much European based. The head of the whole company was also managing director, and there were 10 offices around the world. Every one of those was managing director except for the Americans, who had a president. So yeah, Lyn, very well aware of that. But that person did not have any more influence than the managing director, who was the head of the whole group. managing director to me seems like a more inclusive title, because you're directing, but you're not necessarily controlling. So it can be a different connotation. I think it's always, like in larger organisations in particular, it is very useful to know who's who in the zoo and who you can ultimately go to. If you need to go up through the ranks to get something to happen, it's good to know who the final stop is. And that, whether it's a CEO, managing director, or whatever the title is, they can be as inclusive and collaborative right across the board. But the comments that Kate had made about IKEA and decisions taking a while, you can be collaborative and inclusive, but as you said yourself, Lyn, ultimately there's got to be somewhere where the buck stops, somebody who can make that call if necessary. So you're still including people, you're making them feel part of the decision, but sometimes you really do need that one person to stick their neck in and say, that's it, this is what's going to happen. And as long as it's based on that collaborative and inclusive input, then it will be accepted.
Well, that does depend on the culture of the organisation and founders. So we're seeing more often, Claudette, very interestingly, in the startup space too, where there are equal shares and equal say amongst multiple founders. And similarly to the Kates on the call, they don't move forward unless everyone's in agreement. They don't take anyone. They will not do that, whatever it is, unless they're all on the same page. If they're not all on the same page, it means they haven't got enough information. So it's an interesting time. Over to you, Kerry Nobes, with your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to share an experience from pharmaceuticals some years back, I've got to say. But we had a CEO who was very much up and out of reach of other people. And I remember as a young woman being a leader in there that I was really fearful of him. And it was really funny because I went to a wedding, some years later, and he'd actually retired and he was there. And I said, "Oh, I used to work for you." And he said, "Of course I know that." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "But we never spoke. We never had a conversation." And he was telling me how much he hated being put up there, and that he had all these people around him who directed him to who he could spend his time with and who he couldn't. And it was just such an interesting view, because I said to him, I was petrified of you as a leader in your organization. And he was horrified that that was the case, had no idea, but he had people who were stopping people from speaking with him. So it's sort of like, yes, you need the decision maker, but part of what I see, and I work, for those who don't know me, I work in training and coaching. I find a lot of times that the CEOs get isolated and they don't get to get the info from the ground floor. And they're the people who have got the info. And so I'm loving hearing your cooperative, Kate, in that people get a say and you know what's going on and you've got different people giving you different views, and it's not just my view. So I'm excited by that. And I'm with you that there is I think for many people, there's a gap, I guess, between a CEO and the person that is the CEO. And if we can break that and get more two-way, then I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, this is giving me a great idea for another topic around sort of the next generation of corporate structures around as you scale an organisation and creating sort of decision-making pods I've been very interested in that, being my area of study historically, in terms of organisational planning and change. It's really interesting seeing how the values of society, I look at my 4 kids in their 20s, and they have very, very strong views that are more aligned with socialism than capitalism. And I think that as they become leaders in their fields, they're going to be wanting to have different structures than that true, I think Dr. Kate called it reductive or something, this reductive patriarchal structure. It doesn't really serve this next generation in the way they like to do things. Sarah, you've got yourself off mute. Did you have something else that you'd like to share before I move on with the next thing?
Only that the way Kate's describing, and also the way Dr. Kate described the IKEA thing, it's like the CEO role is more the board chair type of equivalent, where you facilitate the making of the decision, or you're the preserver of or the steward of the governance or the process, not the traditional single decision maker, which I don't think in a lot of companies ever really is like that one, but it is certainly okay, buck stops with me. But what I would also like to add is in one of the industries that I worked, the increasing number of women in it was correlated with the increasing or the decreasing salaries in it. So the feminization of the industry actually reduced the salary. And I think sometimes that if you trace that right back, it's some of that modesty and title. And then when you do a salary survey and things, well, you've got a lower title than someone with a CEO title. So, that innate modesty and maybe, socialism aspect of the way you want to lead a business and the way you want to call yourself actually inadvertently serves to devalue the industry. So while I would say call yourself what you like, I would also say don't give up the CEO title if it serves a purpose externally, even if you don't care what you're called internally.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'm going to, I just can see there's so much we could have really delved into here. We're really scratching the surface. Before we wrap up, I used good old ChatGPT to do a bit of a search for you, Kate, around what would be a fresh and non-traditional title for Chief Executive Officer. And it came up with Visionary Leader, Head of Strategy and Growth, Principal Architect of Success, which I personally liked, Lead Innovator, Executive Navigator, Chief Impact Officer, Head of Enterprise. So Head of is another one, Strategic Steward, Chief Vision and Culture Officer, Corporate Trailblazer, which I love too. And I did actually ask it to give 5 alternative CEO titles just for you, Kate, being in the sustainability sector. And it came up with Chief Sustainability Strategist, Head of Regenerative Business, Executive Steward of Sustainability, Chief Impact and Innovation Officer, Guardian of Sustainable Growth, all of which I thought were really sweet and quite powerful at the same time. So it's got that soft and that hard kind of piece to it. Look, it's been such a great topic, and one that I think really does open up so many other issues around how business is evolving and our role as women in helping shape this great change that's occurring. Bringing that balance of the masculine energy and the feminine energy that we all carry into our worlds, but with making sure that, we've got these conversations going, because the value is often in the conversation. If you have an interesting title, you can always put underneath it in brackets, if it's on a business card or on your email signature, AKA Chief Executive Officer. But if you've got an interesting title, it does say something about you and about who you are and what you stand for, and probably opens the door for a great conversation. So I would love for everyone to check out. I'd love to hear how you're feeling. One thing that you took out of this conversation today, and before you log off, pop into the chat box what topic you'd like us to tackle in the future that's sort of may be relevant to this, maybe an extension of this, or it may be something completely random. We're always looking for fabulous topics to cover in these kinds of webinar and roundtable discussions, and we love to keep them at this kind of size so that we all get the opportunity to talk. So this has been a great format as far as I'm aware, but I would love to hear your thoughts about that as well. So let's go around the table. How do I feel? And the one thing I've taken out of the conversation today, Claudette, can I ask you to go first? If you take yourself off mute.
Sorry, I just had a bit of a distraction.
How do you feel? And what's one thing that you've taken from today's discussion?
That stereotypes do need to be broken down, for sure. But whether that's attached to any one kind of title, I'm not sure about that.
No.
Because it's up to the individual.
And how are you feeling?
Yeah, it's as you say, it's an interesting topic, and it's actually something that goes far beyond a title, way beyond.
Yeah.
And some of the experiences that I've had colour that opinion. So it's been a good morning.
It has been a good morning. Louisa, are you able to take yourself off mute? Can you?
Well, Louisa. Maybe not.
Shalom, can we hear from you? No, they may be on or off. Over to Sonia.
I'm actually didn't realize how big a topic we were covering actually. Yeah, I'm quite thinking it through all the different perspectives. But I really I love the descriptors that Dr. Kate used: reductive, hierarchical, and learning about, you know, a different way of doing. You know, it does become a bit of time pressure as well to be able to allow that more collaborative approach to take, you know, to take the forefront in the process. But really interesting.
Thank you. Teresa.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I feel good. It's been an interesting meeting, and I liked hearing all the different perspectives. I think the one thing that I probably think is the strongest point was it's not really about the title or the it's more about the culture that you create around it. If you've got that kind of a flat leadership in a sense, but still knowing that there is someone that's going to make that end decision, but you've created a culture that's warm, friendly, inviting. In my case, being a creative, it needs to be that, otherwise people won't come along. That's probably what I got out of it. But I got a few things like about loneliness at the top and stuff. I think sometimes people might feel that their title separates them from people, and that's probably a really good topic to talk about, because once you have like a CEO title, which I don't know if Kate can probably relate to this when she took on her CEO role, that because she didn't want to be separated from her colleagues who she knows also work so hard. So there's that element of feeling that people might see her differently because of that title. Yeah, in your particular industry, which I don't know what that is. But thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Over to you, Estelle.
No, it was an interesting morning, and it was kind of really, because I haven't actually given this a lot of thought myself, so it was really nice to actually explore different aspects and go beyond, I guess, what I'd seen in other organizations as well, which is more that the need for hierarchy and that sort of thing. So I found that really positive.
Thanks, Estelle. Over to you, Vida.
Yeah, I've found the conversation really interesting, and it's opened up a lot of things within me that have been dormant for quite some time. In my past, I spent many years working with eco-villages in their governance models. I've done a lot of research around the world on eco-villages, and just what Kate was saying, it really intrigued me about the decision-making models, like if it's consent or consensus, or how that decision-making model works for different needs of decisions. And yeah, I found it really intriguing. But I think that decision-making and decision-making models would be a really good topic as we move forward. Yeah, and I feel very curious at the moment, very inspired. And I just want to say, my title is Inspirer. I've had the same title for 15 years because I work for myself. And especially when I started off, it was really important that my purpose and why was so clear, because I had to inspire myself all the time. So it was just as much for me to inspire myself. It's up to me to be the source of my own inspiration.
I love that. I love that. And you are. And you're this.
Thank you, everyone. I have to run, so thank you, everyone.
See you later, Vida. Kerry Nobes, what about you? How are you feeling, and what did you take out of today?
I really enjoyed listening, and for me, I'm taking away a bit like Vida. I'm very curious. I'm now in what can I call myself? Because it's my business, and it's something that has struggled. I've struggled with coming from corporate and then into my own space, and to go, well, what do I put on a business card? What do I call myself? And hearing others that, just I'd forgotten how much strength there is in a title. And I love the let's get out there and put something different and just show a little bit of me and let people figure it out. Sounds fun. Thanks.
I love that, Kerry. You're always so fun and optimistic. And I know my husband, as a CEO, would be horrified if anyone was to take his title off him. He loves it when I go, "Oh, hi, honey. How was work? How's the CEO?" He stands up all tall. It's so cute. Okay, Lauren, over to you. How are you feeling? What did you get out of today?
Feeling contemplative, ruminative. It's an interesting topic to discuss. I think some really interesting points are made across the board with everyone. I really liked what Vida said at the end around decision-making processes for organisations, because at the end of the day, for organisations to move forward, decisions need to be made. So what hierarchy looks like, whether that's reductive or so, decisions still need to be made at the end of the day. And that's why I'm in that contemplative space, because I'm like, what does that look like versus a title? I think we need to maybe move away from the word title, move towards decision making, and then businesses form things around that. And I also liked what Kerry said, have a bit of fun with it. Sometimes we take things far too seriously, and sometimes it's good to have a bit of fun with what we do with work as well.
And very relevant for someone in your role where you're working with two founders, and at the end of the day, they're probably expecting you to make decisions on certain things, but having that sort of, that understanding around what can I make decisions on, and what things do I have to go to you for, and who's going to make what decisions. So it's really interesting when you've got a lean team with a couple of very strong founders. Oh, Lauren, I think we're going to have a lot of fun delving into that one too. Over to you, Sarah. How are you feeling, and what did you take out of today?
Well, I'm also super curious about what the future org structures might look like. And what I took from today was back to Teresa's sort of decision-making process. And there is that, in a leadership vacuum, someone will fill the gap. And so putting the name on the back is basically saying, okay, this is where that goes to, rather than having that, people just taking situational leadership and then it all goes a little bit crazy. So that I think, that serves the purpose that it needed to serve.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Over to Dr. Kate Ringveld before we head over to Kate Biondo for final words. Do you want to take yourself off mute there, Kate, Dr. Kate?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really good and great to kind of hear the different opinions about leadership. I mean, I know Kate and I spend a lot of time talking about, cooperatives and how awesome they are. While I also work at Galactic, I'm also part of Curtin University, and I feel very frustrated by the it's to me it's an overinflated hierarchy that they have, and it takes so long to get anything done. And I just, I reflect on both models, and I think, unfortunately, universities are now run like businesses, and so, we're having conversations around how long does it take to mark an assignment, and here you've got 15 minutes to mark a 3,000-word assignment, whereas which is obviously impossible. Whereas in Galactic, we can make those decisions together, and you actually get to hear from the person who is actually doing the work, what is your experience, and can you share that with us? And then can we make a decision that's more collegiate, whereas, not in university. So yeah, that's been really, really interesting and great to hear all the opinions. It's lovely. It's really good.
Excellent, thanks, Kate. And final words to wrap up our session today.
Yeah, well, I'm feeling a lot happier than I was when I first joined. I'm sorry, I've got a lot on happening at work, but and a sense of joy at that that there's lots of different women who are thinking about this differently, and yeah, what that position, yeah, about what position we're taking, yeah, when it's so that feminizing of the C-suite, I think, is a really great one. Yeah, so thank you, everybody. It's been fantastic. Something that I sometimes I get a bit of pushback about leadership, and I think something that Simon Sinek has said is leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in our charge. And I really like keeping that in my mind, that's what my CEO role is around as well, is what other, someone else said, inspirer, Vida said inspirer. But maybe what I need to change to is joint decision maker. I can be a JDM. So, so there's, scope for us to be doing some different things. And I think that's really good. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure. I think there's still in certain environments, just to make things clear, you just got to say it. You just got to be, yep, I'm CEO. There we go, full stop. Yep. So that everyone knows what you do. Yep. So, yeah, thank you, everybody. It's been great.
Oh, thank you, Kate, and thanks for bringing this subject to the table. We've loved it. We've loved your open sharing, your vulnerability to create such a safe space for us all to be coming and sharing our different perspectives. I have great hope that as organisations do embrace different structures, that there are all these options, and that will attract, the more diverse leaders into those key roles, which also then will enable, women and, other members of the minority groups and cultures to come forward and step into these roles. Because I think in some ways, I had the opportunity to be a general manager of a very fast growing IT company, and I loved it, but I was expected to make a lot of the decisions, and that's not my style. I'm a collaborative decision maker. And so again, it's about finding the right culture, no matter what they call that at the top. And I really did find that very challenging for a couple of years. I kind of ended up leaving there with great burnout. the pressure of being the one where the buck stopped with me. I'm not naturally that kind of leader. I think Claudette has obviously been a great managing director and has had those kind of skills to be able to go from, 2 different roles in that kind of level, that I just really admire people. I'd rather work with them and help them and coach them and support them in those roles, but I don't find being in these sort of roles at all comfortable for me either. So love the topic. Thank you for being here, everyone, for staying. We're slightly over time, and we'll have a good look at the chat box ideas and keep an eye on the calendar. Lots more things to dig deep and unpack. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend when you get there.
Thanks,
Bye.
Lynn. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Kate.